G'day, this is Gary Winkler from the Missouri Association for Creation. Thank you for joining us to hear about this month's special animal, the platypus. The platypus is one of God's most unique creatures. It's classified as a mammal, but it lays eggs, it walks like an alligator. It's sometimes called the duck-billed platypus because it has a bill like a duck, except the platypus bill is actually rubbery and flexible. It has a tail like a beaver, although the platypus tail is more furry. It has many other amazing design features. This wonder from down under is only found in the wild in eastern Australia and Tasmania, and it was introduced recently in nearby Kangaroo Island. Adults range from 12 to 32 inches long and weigh between 2 and 22 pounds. They're believed to live for 20 to 30 years. Their dense fur has 900 hairs per each square millimeter. That's over 500,000 hairs per square inch. That's about 400 times denser than for people. Platypus fur is waterproof and traps air for insulation. There's 2 layers, a woolly undercoat, and shiny longer hairs on top. The average temperature is only 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 9 degrees lower than ours and most mammals. This is perfect for spending hours in the often cool water. Its tail helps it dive, and the tail also stores fat as an energy reserve, similar to a camel's hump. They are one of the very few poisonous mammals. The males have spurs on their hind feet that can inject poison. It's not deadly to humans, but it can cause extreme pain that can last for weeks or even months. And they have been known to kill dogs that attack them. Scientists are studying their venom, and they believe the studies may lead to making better painkillers. The females are not poisonous and lose the spur by the time they are a year old. A platypus finds a lot of its food at the bottom of lakes and streams. When diving, they have a flap of skin that they use to cover their eyes and ears. They search for worms, shrimp, crayfish, and insect larvae on the river bottom. They have electroreceptors in their bills that are so sensitive they can detect muscle twitches of little critters on the river bottom, which give off tiny electric fields. They move their bill from side to side to scan the river bottom. They're mostly active at night, spending about 12 hours finding food, eating about 20% of their body weight daily. They don't have a typical stomach of a mammal because they don't really need one. They feed on small, soft invertebrates that don't need as much breaking down as the food that most other mammals eat. They don't have teeth, but have grinding plates that pulverize their food. But the food does need some breaking down, and instead of stomach acid, they have an organ called a gastric mill that contains protozoa and bacteria that help do that job. They sleep most of the other 12 hours of their day. The platypus is a great swimmer. One design feature that helps with that is their webbed feet. Here's a brief glimpse of one swimming. When on land, the webbing folds out of the way and they often use their claws for digging. Scientists recently discovered that their fur is biofluorescent and gives a strange green glow under ultraviolet light. They found that flying squirrels and opossums have that property too. It's also seen in some frogs and turtles and birds and plants. It'll be interesting to find out someday why God gave some animals that trait. It's seeming like it's nocturnal animals that have it. The Australian Aborigines, of course, knew all about the platypus. Bundabura was one of the many names they had for them. But the critter was quite new to the European settlers. In 1798, the governor of New South Wales, Australia, sent a platypus pelt and sketch to biologist George Shaw back in England. Shaw couldn't believe it was real. He cut the pelt with scissors, trying to find stitches, because he thought someone had sewn a duckbill onto the pelt of a beaver-like animal. That pelt is still in the British Museum of History in London, and the scissor marks are still visible on it. His suspicion was wrong, but it was reasonable. Back then there were a lot of people making fakes with taxidermy and making phony fossil reconstructions. Unfortunately, fake fossil production is still a problem today. It wasn't until 1884, almost 90 years after the first platypus pelt was sent to England, that the rumor that they laid eggs was finally confirmed. Scottish biologist William Hay Caldwell traveled to Australia and finally found the elusive platypus eggs. European scientists were so fascinated with the platypus that there were literally thousands of these critters killed and sent to Europe to be studied. Darwin's voyage on the HMS Beagle included a stop in Australia, where he saw the platypus. He mentioned them 7 times in his book Origin of Species. Darwin constantly struggled with the fact that there weren't lots of transitional forms like his evolutionary theories predicted. Animals seemed consistent with being in separate created kinds. Here in his book, he says the distinctness of specific forms and their not being blended together by innumerable transitional links is a very obvious difficulty. It's a very obvious difficulty still today. He liked the platypus because it had features found in several very different animals. But the truth is, the platypus is just another created kind, and it's always been a platypus. In 1943, as World War II was raging, Winston Churchill requested 6 live ones to be transported to Britain. David Flea convinced him that a group of them would not make the journey well, and it would work better to send just one. The recruit was renamed Winston. It was a very secretive mission. Here's a communication from Brendan Bracken, the British Minister of Information, telling Churchill that the platypus is on its way, along with 50,000 specially chosen worms, and a warning that Churchill will need to exile his cat Nelson, named after Admiral Horatio Nelson, because the platypus and Nelson would very likely not get along. Motor vessel Port Phillip went on the long voyage to England through the Panama Canal, and Winston was doing very well. But as they crossed the Atlantic, the worm supply was dwindling and Winston was rationed, only being allowed 750 worms per day from his normal 900. Then, about 4 days from England, a German submarine attacked the Port Phillip. The Port Phillip responded with depth charges. The Port Phillip and its crew survived, but Winston was found dead. It was believed that the platypus's incredible sensory system was overloaded by the noise and vibration and fields from the depth charges. Winston's body was taxidermied and turned over to the Royal College of Surgeons. Speaking of a top secret platypus, here's the more recent, but less real, Perry the platypus from the Phineas and Ferb show. Unlike other mammals, the platypus starts out life in an egg. A mama platypus digs a burrow up to 30 feet long and makes a nest in it, often using her tail to bring leaves, and lays 1 to 3 eggs at a time. Normally it's 2. The eggs develop for 28 days inside their mom. Then the eggs are laid and they're incubated for about 10 days. During incubation, the mother will hold the eggs against her belly with her tail, tucked under her. The egg is less than a ½ inch in diameter. It doesn't crack like a chicken egg, it's more leathery, like an alligator egg. Here's a rare glimpse at one hatching. To break out of the egg, the platypus is designed with egg teeth, like birds and reptiles. They also have what is called a caruncle, a spot on the top of their snout that helps them break out of the egg. It's thought that they start breaking out with the caruncle, then tear the leathery egg with their egg teeth. This picture is actually an echidna embryo developing in its egg. We'll talk about the echidnas later. They're similar to the platypus. The mother platypus produces milk, but the baby platypus has a bill that wouldn't work so well for nursing. So, unlike the cat shown on the left and most other mammals, the platypus doesn't have nipples. The baby platypus laps up the milk from puddles of milk that secrete from pores and small patches in the skin on the mother's tummy. This is not as sanitary as drinking from a nipple, so our creator put special antibiotic properties in platypus milk. Australian researchers have detected a special protein in platypus milk that gives the milk its antibiotic power. Proteins have to have just the right constituents, then be folded just right to do the job they're designed for. Protein folding is an astonishingly complex process. Specially designed supercomputers have struggled to just simulate protein folding. The researchers say we may be able to use this protein as a better alternate to our current antibiotics, which often become less effective due to antibiotic resistance. The protein had an appearance that had never been seen before. It reminded the researchers of Shirley Temple's curly hair. They were quite surprised at what they had found. A baby platypus is called a puggle. By the way, more than one platypus are usually called platypuses, but platypi is also used. And platypi is probably more correct in Latin, and it's more fun to say, so I'll use platypi. By the way, platypus in Latin means flat or broad feet. The platypus is classified as a monotreme. Monotremes are a tiny portion of the animals that have been classified as mammals. Mammals produce milk for their young, are warm-blooded, have 3 middle ear bones, and have fur or hair. The monotremes all have those characteristics, but they're the only mammals known to lay eggs. The only known monotremes are platypi and echidnas. Short-beaked echidnas are very common, found all over Australia. Attenborough's long-beaked echidnas are very rare and only found on a tiny spot of the nearby island of New Guinea. Western long-beaked echidnas are critically endangered and found on the western tip of New Guinea, while the eastern long-beaked echidnas are a little more plentiful and found on a strip of central and eastern New Guinea. You can see that the snout of an echidna is much more slender than the platypus, and they have spines similar to a porcupine or hedgehog. Evolutionary scientists are still struggling to make any sense of the platypus. They've found evidence of several ancestors, which they claim go back 100 million years or more. This platypus ancestor was thought to be about the same as they are today, except back then adults kept their teeth, whereas they fall out in present-day platypi when they're young. Today's adult platypi then grind their food with special keratinized food grinding pads called ceratodontidae. You can see the tail does look a little different than a modern platypus, but they only found a jawbone. Exactly how much can one tell about the tail from a jawbone? There are not many platypus fossils. A complete skull was found in the Riverslay region in northwest Queensland, Australia. Evolutionary dating of them is a moving target with claims of 5 to 24 million years ago. They were larger than today's platypus and also had teeth as an adult. This one is only known from a tooth. Platypi have very unique teeth, so it probably really was a platypus tooth, and they probably really were larger than today's platypi, just like lots of animals in the past. But there's a lot of guesswork from this tooth. The tooth really just points to the truth. The platypus was created by God on day 6, about 6,000 years ago. Like the other kinds of animals, they were created with variety programmed into them to adapt to and thrive in the environments that they would find themselves in. The platypus isn't specifically listed in the Bible, but God tells us we should learn about him from all his animals. His animals know their Creator, and it is our Creator who gives them and gives us life. He gives his animals what they need when they ask him, and he provides us with what we need when we ask him. God reveals his power and his divine nature in his creatures. The platypus is one of many incredible creatures. He gave people intelligence and creative ability, but we can't come close to making a real platypus, or even a single-cell protozoa. God has made it obvious that there is a creator. There is no excuse to think otherwise. The same Jesus, referred to by his disciple John as the Word, is both our Creator and our Savior, humbling himself to become a man and die for our sins, so we can join him one day in heaven. There will be animals in heaven. Will there be platypi? Someday we'll find out. Don't forget to check out our other 11 animals, and don't forget to give the praise and honor to the only one that can and did create them and create us.